The town of Dry Creek had seen its share of hard years, droughts that cracked the soil, fires that took homes, and fevers that carried away good men before their time. But nothing had shaken the people more than what happened to Chief Red Hawk's daughter. She had been the pride of her father's people, tall, graceful, fierce in spirit, and kind to all who crossed her path. Her name was Naeli, meaning, I love you, in her mother's tongue, and it fit her like the wind fits the plains. But a year ago, a horse threw her during a raid gone wrong, and she had not walked since. Her legs were still as stone, and her once laughing eyes grew dim with every passing moon. The chief had offered everything he owned, horses, gold, and even his finest lands, to anyone who could heal her. Yet the doctors, the shamans, the so-called miracle men all came and went. None could bring her back from the prison of her body. When the sickness of despair crept into the camp, the people began to whisper that Naeli's spirit was cursed. Some said it was punishment from the gods for her father's wars, others said the spirits wanted her for themselves. No one dared go near her tent anymore. No one, except the quiet cowboy who lived on the edge of the plains. His name was Eli Carter. Folks in town didn't know much about him. He'd come from somewhere down south, bought a small piece of land, and spent his days tending cattle and fixing fences. He spoke little, drank less, and seemed content to let the world forget him. But beneath his calm eyes lived a weight he carried alone, the kind that made a man both gentle and dangerous in the same breath. Eli first heard about Naeli at the trading post. Old men sat by the barrels and whispered that the chief's daughter wouldn't make it through the winter. One of them laughed bitterly. He offered 100 horses to anyone who could bring her back to her feet. But who'd risk crossing that camp? Red Hawk hates our kind. Eli didn't laugh. He simply stood there, quiet, his rough hands tightening around the strap of his saddlebag. He'd seen pain like that before, in a child's eyes, in his own mother's. Something inside him refused to let it go. That evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, Eli rode toward the old camp. The land grew wilder the closer he got, the air thick with the scent of smoke and sage. Warriors stopped him at the river's edge, their spears low, their eyes sharp. No white man crosses here, one said coldly. Go back. But Eli didn't move. He tipped his hat politely and replied in a voice calm as dusk. I didn't come to take anything. I came to give something back. When they tried to turn him away again, a cry came from inside the camp, an older man's voice, deep with command. Let him through. Chief Red Hawk stood outside his tent like a figure carved from mountain rock. Time had not broken him, but sorrow had hollowed his gaze. You've got courage coming here, cowboy, he said, his tone heavy with both curiosity and warning. Why are you here? Eli dismounted slowly, meeting the old chief's stare. Because no one else would come, he said simply. And because of seen healing that don't come from doctors. For a long moment, the chief said nothing. The fire crackled between them, throwing gold on their faces. Finally, he nodded toward the tent behind him. She's inside, but know this, if you harm her, no one will find your bones come morning. Eli just nodded once and walked past him. Inside, the air smelled of herbs and sorrow. The girl lay on a bed of woven furs, her skin pale, her eyes fixed on the ceiling as though looking for the sky. She didn't flinch when he entered. Another man come to promise things he can't deliver. She murmured bitterly. Eli knelt beside her, his voice low. No, ma'am, I came to listen. Maybe that's the first thing healing needs. Her eyes flickered then, just for a second. It was the first spark of life he'd seen in her face. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, and the wind bent the trees as if bowing to something unseen. Eli didn't know why he was there, not fully, but deep down, he felt he was exactly where fate wanted him to be. The nights in Red Hawk's camp were long and restless. Coyotes howled beyond the river, and the cold crept in like a thief. Eli stayed close to Naeli's tent, refusing comfort, sleeping only when exhaustion dragged him down. He watched her breathe, her chest rising slowly, her lips whispering words in her native tongue that he couldn't understand. Sometimes she spoke to the spirits, sometimes to no one at all. And every time, he'd feel that ache inside him deepen, the same ache he'd carried since his little sister died years ago, when he'd been too late to save her. Maybe that was why he couldn't leave Naeli to her fate. On the third night, a fever gripped her. Her body shook violently, sweat soaking her hair as she murmured deliriously. The healers had given up long ago, but Eli didn't. He stayed by her side, cooling her forehead with damp cloths, holding her trembling hands until dawn broke. The chief stood at the entrance, watching silently. When morning came and the fever broke, the old man spoke for the first time in days. "You did what our best healers could not," he said quietly. "You kept her here." Eli shrugged, his voice rough from sleeplessness. "Sometimes it ain't medicine that keeps someone alive. Sometimes it's just not giving up on 'em." Days turned into weeks. Eli began to teach Naeli to move her hands again, then her arms. He crafted a wooden brace from an old saddle and helped her sit upright, holding her steady as she fought against her useless legs. Each small victory lit her face with fragile pride. "You believe I'll walk again," she said one evening as the sun painted the plains gold. Eli smiled faintly. "I believe you already are," he said, tapping her heart. "Just gotta remind your legs what they're missin'." But the people of the camp weren't all pleased. Some whispered that Eli's presence offended the spirits, that he would bring ruin to them all. One night, a group of young warriors confronted him by the fire. "She is cursed," one spat. "And now you will share her curse." Eli stood his ground, eyes calm but unyielding. "If believing a woman can be saved as a curse," he said, "then I'll wear it gladly." The confrontation ended without blood, but from then on, Eli slept with one hand near his rifle and his faith stronger than ever. Naeli's strength grew little by little. She began to feel warmth in her legs again, a tingling that made her gasp and cry all at once. When Eli helped her stand for the first time, her knees trembled violently, but she held herself upright for a breath, and that breath was worth more than gold. Tears streaked her cheeks as she collapsed into his arms. "You did it," she whispered. But Eli shook his head gently. "No, you did." That night, under a sky thick with stars, Chief Red Hawk came to him. "My daughter walks again," he said, voice breaking. "I owe you a debt no man can repay." Eli looked out over the plains, his face shadowed by the firelight. "You don't owe me, Chief. I just did what was right." But the old man placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did more than that. You reminded us what it means to hope." And for the first time in years, Eli felt something he thought he'd lost, peace. By spring, Naeli could walk short distances with a cane. The people who once called her cursed now followed her through the camp, tears in their eyes. She smiled again, laughed again, and every step she took was a miracle written in dust and sunlight. Eli had planned to leave once she was well, to return to his quiet life and the silence he knew so well. But when he saddled his horse, she appeared beside him, her braid swaying in the wind. "You're leaving," she said softly, not as a question but as a truth she already knew. He nodded slowly. "My work here's done." Her hand brushed his arm, light as a breeze. "Then let me walk you to the edge of the world you saved me from." They walked together until the camp disappeared behind them. The plains stretched endlessly before them, wild and golden. "Why did you come, Eli?" she asked finally. No one else would. He thought for a long time before answering. "Because someone once gave up on me," he said quietly. "And I swore I'd never do the same to another soul." Naeli smiled, eyes bright with the kind of strength that only pain can forge. "Then maybe that's why the spirits sent you." She stepped closer, her voice a whisper carried by the wind. "Stay." Eli looked out across the horizon, then back at her. "I don't belong anywhere," he said. But she shook her head. "You belong where hearts heal." And so he stayed, not as a savior, not as a wanderer, but as part of something greater. Together they rebuilt what was broken, her people's faith, the land's silence, and his own weary soul. Years later, they would speak of the quiet cowboy who defied curses and brought light back to the chief's daughter. Some said he was touched by the spirits. Others said he simply cared too deeply. But those who truly knew the story said only this. He didn't save her because she was the chief's daughter. He saved her because no one else would. The nights in the camp stretched on like endless winters, full of distant drums, flickering firelight, and the sound of coyotes calling from the dark plains. Eli barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, the girl lying motionless under woven blankets, her breath faint, her spirit fighting to stay tethered to a body that had betrayed her. He'd been there a week now, long enough for whispers to spread like smoke. The townsfolk thought he was foolish for staying among people who distrusted his kind, and the tribesmen thought he was arrogant for believing he could save her when their best healers had failed. But Eli didn't care. Something far greater than logic held him there. Something that felt like purpose, the kind a man gets only once in his life. Each morning, before the first light touched the valley, he sat by Naeli's bedside. He spoke to her softly, telling her stories from the plains, of the sunrise that painted the sky like fire, of wild horses that ran free, of his mother's lullabies. Sometimes she listened in silence, her eyes distant but not empty. Other times she drifted into restless sleep, her fingers twitching as though her body remembered what her mind refused to accept. He wasn't a doctor or a man of faith, he was just a cowboy with calloused hands and an aching conscience. But he'd seen what a little hope could do for the dying, and he refused to let that hope die here. One night, the chief approached him with heavy steps. His face was lined with sorrow and disbelief. "You've been here long enough, cowboy," Red Hawk said, standing tall though his voice trembled. "You've shown kindness, and for that, I thank you. But she cannot be saved. The spirits have taken her legs. No man can change what the spirits decide." Eli rose from his seat by the fire, his gaze calm but firm. "Maybe so," he said slowly, "but maybe the spirits are waiting for someone to try." Red Hawk's expression darkened. "You speak boldly for a man who doesn't know our ways." "I don't need to know the ways," Eli replied. "I just need to know. She's still breathing, and that means she ain't done yet." The old chief said nothing more that night, but when he turned to leave, there was a flicker in his eyes, the faintest glimmer of something that looked like respect. That same night, a fever came over Nayeli. Her skin burned, her lips whispered words in her native tongue, calling for someone long gone. Eli sat beside her all through the dark hours, changing cloths, whispering calm words, refusing to let go of her hand. The storm outside howled as if testing his resolve. By dawn, the fever broke. She opened her eyes, weak but alive. "You stayed," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Reckon I did," he said softly. "Couldn't let you face the night alone." From that day on, her strength began to stir. It was faint at first, the twitch of a finger, the blink of determination in her eyes, but it was there. Eli built her a brace from scrap wood and leather, something crude but steady enough to help her sit upright. When she did, for the first time in months, she wept. Not from pain, but from the terrifying beauty of feeling alive again. "I can't walk," she murmured. "Not yet," he said. "But you can fight, and that's more than most." The people of the camp watched in silence. Some called it foolishness, others called it hope. Every morning, Eli helped her exercise, small movements, simple stretches, and every evening, he spoke to her of life beyond pain. He never told her how much she reminded him of his little sister, the one who'd died waiting for help that never came. But maybe she saw it in his eyes, because one day she said softly, "You lost someone, didn't you?" He froze, then nodded once. "A long time ago. I couldn't save her." Nayeli's hand brushed his. "Then maybe the spirits sent you to save me instead." Those words cut deep. For the first time in years, Eli felt something rise inside him, not guilt, not grief, but redemption. He realized then that he wasn't just helping her walk again, she was helping him stand up from the weight he'd carried all his life. But not everyone shared that faith. Late one evening, as the fires burned low, a group of young warriors confronted him. Their faces were painted with anger and fear. "You should leave, cowboy," one growled. "Every day you stay, her curse spreads. You bring trouble here." Eli stood, calm but unflinching. "If bringing hope is trouble," he said evenly, "then I'll stay till it burns me." The leader sneered. "Then may the spirits judge you." "They already have," Eli answered. "And they ain't done with her yet." The warriors left in silence, but their glares burned hotter than the fire. When Eli turned back to Nayeli's tent, he found her awake, eyes wet but steady. "They're afraid," she said quietly. "Not of you, of believing again." He nodded, sitting beside her. "That's the hardest thing for folks to do, believe in what they can't see." The moonlight fell across her face, soft and silver. She reached out, touching his rough hand with trembling fingers. "Then believe for me," she whispered. And so he did. Every sunrise after that, he believed, through pain, through doubt, through the long quiet hours when nothing seemed to change. Because deep in his heart, he knew something the others didn't. Healing doesn't begin in the body. It begins when someone refuses to give up on you. And Eli Carter, the quiet cowboy no one noticed, refused to give up.